Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 111 of the Freelancers show. This week on our panel we have Curtis McHale.
G'day.
Eric Davis.
Hi.
And Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. And there's no special guest this week. We're going to be talking about building and managing your portfolio. Now, what inspired me to start this conversation is actually an email I got from somebody that you might have heard of before. There's this guy, Eric Davis. I signed up for his mailing list, and I get an email from him every week. So I got Portfolio Part 1 last week, and I got Portfolio Part 2 about an hour ago. I didn't realize that there was a Part 2 until I got it, but he's got a lot of great advice in there, and I thought that maybe we could talk about how do you build your portfolio. This also is really related to another question that I get frequently, and that is, I can't find a job, so I decided to go freelance, but I don't have a portfolio, or, I don't have anything to show my clients. I'm really curious to see what everybody thinks. I know that Curtis has done quite a bit of work, and, I haven't really looked at his consulting site in a while, so I don't even remember if there is a portfolio on there.
It just relaunched last week, so yes, it is. And it's totally different if you haven't looked at it since last week.
Where do we find it?
sfndesign.ca. And as of this recording, there's one or two bugs that I launched with intentionally, because I just didn't feel like killing the rest of them.
Right, so you've got that latest work section in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can click on Our Work. Oh, that looks really good.
Thank you.
Can we talk a little bit about how you want to display your portfolio? I mean, let's assume that you've built some stuff, and then we'll talk about how to build your portfolio if you don't feel like you have a strong one. How did you decide to put this together? I mean, do you just stick the images up there and put a link to your work, or is there more to it than that?
There's more to it than that. So I wrote this originally a while ago and didn't really launch it because I wasn't happy with it. But my original copy was pretty waffly, like, I built them a site and it was cool, and that was about it. Whereas I tried to focus a lot more on here were their problems and here's what we did to solve them, right? Mm-hmm. It can't get in deep technical detail, but it's a clear, this was the problem, this is how we solved it.
That makes sense. You do the work on WordPress, so most of the stuff that you work on is stuff that's going to be out there.
Yeah, there's a lot that is. There's one or two things. There's one client that's in my portfolio, and I don't really show a lot because he wants to keep it. He feels his industry is very competitive, and his competitive advantage is his internal process, and we built some of that. So I am allowed to show that to customers, say through a screencast or screen share, but I don't show a lot of it in the actual portfolio site.
So how do you explain to people what you did? Because, most of the time when I'm working on stuff, I either built the entire thing, or, maybe I contributed to parts of it, but I didn't do the entire thing.
And you start with the problems you're solved, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on one of my clients, trying to think, they're on here. Wakefield Scarce Galleries. They're an antique store that I worked for a little while ago now, and we do some updates. But their problem was the site was just plain broken. The guy who built it before guy or girl, I don't even remember now, who had no idea about one or two foundational concepts in WordPress, like how to work with the templates. And so it was all broken. There's 301 redirects. And so when I talk about that one, we talk about solving that issue and then cleaning up a ton of the code. There was huge portions that they had to hand code if they wanted to update it. And we moved all of that into updating itself for them, or easily updatable through the WordPress admin.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm a little curious what Eric's take is on some of this stuff, because I'm assuming you've built plugins for Redmine that didn't necessarily have an interface you could show off. So do you just explain what it does, or do you...
To a point. I do my portfolio a bit differently because, most of my stuff's back-end. Most of my stuff, it might not have a UI, or, it might not be something that I actually coded on the UI. I dig more into, the problem the customer has, and then, what I did, how I solved it. And so even if there's nothing I can show, or like Curtis was saying, it's like a business process, I could say, we set up a business process that, took, I don't know, whatever, increase the leads from 10 to 50 a week or something, And the big thing for me is trying to show the result. So it's not necessarily the what I built, but it's the what that thing actually achieved. And so, even if you do back-end stuff or stuff that's not really visually nice to look at, if it's just, code that runs on a server, you can still talk about the results you did. And that's actually the really big thing a lot of clients are looking for.
That makes sense. I really do like the visual aspect, though, if I can get it. But I definitely see that.
Yeah, there was one of my first projects I wrote. It was a command line script in .NET that basically you gave it different parameters and it just generated kind of boilerplate code because it was, a huge system. So it would generate like 15 different classes or something for their application that it needed. And it was mostly the glue code, but it saved them from having to type it out and making, stupid little mistakes. And for that, I mean, it's a script you run and it just creates files. So all I did was I actually ran the script with the, the -- help or something to kind of print out how you use it. And I just took a screenshot of that. And then I explained how, this script was saving, programmers hours of time each time I had to add to their system, and how it would, prevent bugs from typos and that sort of thing. So even though that was just an automation script, I still made a visual component just by taking a screenshot of it.
I like it. Now, one other thing I want to ask about, and this is something that I'm seeing on Eric's portfolio, is he's listed a lot of open source software.
Yeah, I haven't done that, although I certainly could. Like, I've worked in most major WordPress e-commerce platforms that are around, so I certainly could add that. Yeah,
and I mean, I've been doing a lot of kind of curation on mine, because in a past life I had over 100 open source Redmine plugins, and the number 100 and the fact that I knew what I was doing was good, but the individual plugins weren't really that important to each new prospective client. And so I've actually kind of curated it and, picked either the biggest plugins that have like the biggest impact or the most complexity. And then the rest of them I kind of lumped into like, I also do work on Redmine plugins such as XYZ. And I found that's a bit better, because you can really overwhelm a client if you just throw everything you've ever done at them.
Yeah, something I'm looking at doing is I've built a few plugins that I use consistently on my client sites when we're doing development and staging, live and staging environments. So that automatically shuts down all the WordPress emails and logs them all instead of sending them for development, so you don't accidentally send 20,000 emails. I'm thinking about highlighting a bunch of those kind of in our work as well, because it's things that I would do or use in their sites to, make the process easier for them.
Yeah, one other thing that I'm curious about with portfolios that comes up frequently with me is that I've done some work for people that had me sign an NDA, and it wasn't one of those horrible ones that make it so that you can't work in this town ever again, but a lot of times they, you can't disclose that you did work on their project or for them, because some of the work that I've done is good work, and I want to show people that I did it. Is there a way to really deal with that, or you just tell people no when they want you to sign an NDA if you want to put the work up on your portfolio?
And my contract has a provision that says I can take kind of extremely confidential information and show it on my portfolio and that sort of thing. I've had clients that strike it out, and because of their situation, it's valid concern. What I've done, and what I actually have another project I'm trying to get added to my portfolio, is to almost every project has like a code name. So I'll use the code name and I'll talk in general terms about the project, what it did, like who it was for. I wouldn't use necessarily screenshots, or maybe I'd do like screenshots of the code or something, but you kind of anonymize it enough, and then you can send it to the client, be like, hey, I want to do this. I want to put this on my portfolio. It's important. It kind of helps me, talk up like how it's a big thing for your business, and, get the green light from them. And if they release it and say like, yeah, you can, that's fine for us, then that can work around the NDA and there shouldn't be any legal problems with it.
Yeah, with my one client, I just sent him the copy on the site before it was officially live, and he approved and said, yep, that's fine with me. He just was concerned about his business process, not necessarily that I show that I worked with him. He understands that I want to show that. So I've only ever once or twice signed one that's like, you can never show this.
Right. So you just talk to him and, maybe change the header to say My Corp or something, and you just kind of describe what you did without actually giving away the details that they care about.
It really depends. I find a lot of the NDA projects are really not all that interesting, and so there's like, it's just a site, whatever. It goes in or it doesn't. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
It's not like they have some foundational new thing that no one ever thought of before. 10 people thought of it, and we're just signing the NDA because they want it signed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, or you generalize it. Like one of them that I'm talking to a client about, I mean, I basically helped build a social network, and I built a lot of the marketing and messaging aspects, which included email delivery. Well, none of that's really NDA-able. I mean, that's
right.
Kind of, that's basic stuff. So that I could put in my portfolio. It just depends on, if I get into processes or results and, especially screenshots and stuff like that, where you gotta, either mock up some dummy data, use a different color scheme or something like that. But, sometimes you might just be able to use the actual site and send it to them. They're like, yeah, like we'll just let you put this a little bit in your portfolio. We don't care about the NDA.
Right.
It's all about communication.
So one other thing that I'm curious about, I am not a design guy. I mean, so when I have a good looking site that I've worked on, the look and feel isn't my work. it's the underlying code that actually makes cool things happen when you click type or whatever on it. So I don't feel bad putting the screenshot up, but I almost feel like I need to disclaim, hey, I didn't do the design on this. I just made it work.
Yeah, you did the workflow, right? So like a screencast would be a good way to show like you did this workflow. This is why it works well, because you built the underlying code. Right. So
yeah, I mean, disclose it. I mean, so like, maybe you put it in a way where you worked with the design created from another designer, or you implemented their design and code. And that way it's not just you took someone's work, but you took it and it shows that you play well with others and all that. And then the final result is this working website. And yeah, screencast would be a great way, because then, they could see the actual functionality with the design.
Yeah, that makes sense. So are there other things that you should be putting in your portfolio? Things that people don't usually think about that would, go in there and look nice in your list?
I've put a lot of open source stuff in mine, and because that was a big part of my business. And I even have an actual portfolio item called open source, which is like the catch-all. And so like if I have a few patches to like say Rails or whatever, I'll include Rails in there. And so that way people can see like I've done work on big open source projects and little ones, but I'm not actually like running it, or I'm not a major player in it. But it's kind of it's a way to translate like, the GitHub commit history into like, okay, here's the business speak. Here's what I did. Here's how it helped the Rails project, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I've linked to my open source report card as well, which like just parses GitHub data to see your contributions, right?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense too. Now, one thing I did notice on, just clicking through you guys, your portfolios, it did seem like with Curtis's, when you click on his and you go into, a particular project, like there's a page for it. And with Eric's, it's more of a list. Here are some of the open source stuff. And so the headers aren't links. It's just, hey, I patched Ruby on Rails. I worked on Redmine. Do you find that one approach works better than the other? I'm wondering what the merits
I've never
are.
tried both, right? I've never tried like A/B testing on both, so I don't know. I would like to think that even as developers, people are drawn to pretty things, right? So they'll see something, oh, that site looks nice, and he worked on that.
I was going to say, for me, the open source one's an oddball. Like I said, it's where it's a list. It's just little snippets versus an actual project where I have different sections and screenshots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could certainly see, say, adding a single open source project and a whole bunch of stuff that I've done for open source in there. But I'd still probably find a pretty screenshot for it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to get into how to build a portfolio a little bit. This is something I'm a little more familiar with. I never actually did put a portfolio section on my consulting website when I had one working, and it didn't really seem to matter. But my portfolio tended to be more along the lines of Teach Me to Code, which are, tutorial screencasts, and Ruby Rogues and JavaScript Jabber and iFreaks and this show, where it shows that I know what I'm talking about, but it doesn't give them specific examples of where I've done something that looks like what they want. So how do I go about, I have things that I could put in my portfolio, but let's say that I'm brand new and I don't have a platform and I don't have a list of projects that I've built. What kinds of things do you do to build that portfolio?
So this is actually that second email you got on my newsletter. It's basically, I've done this myself recently. It's if you don't have any projects or getting started, or like in my case where I'm transitioning out of Redmine into other areas, you kind of want to look and figure out, like, you have an ideal client come to your site. What do they want? What are they looking for? In my case, they're going to probably want me to develop in Ruby on Rails. So I have stuff in my portfolio about that. If you're new, that might be contributing to Rails or contributing to Rails gems or something like that. Another thing might be like, what kind of problems do you solve, or what industries you work in? And in my case, like, I'm trying to get into a lot of building marketing software. And so what I actually did a couple weeks ago, I guess, I sat down and I've been doing a lot of A/B tests, and I've been getting deep into that. And I'm like, well, this program I'm using to kind of run the A/B test is kind of buggy, and I don't really like the way it works. So I spent 2-3 days, built my own version of an A/B testing calculator, put it on my site, made it free, whatever. But I was able to write that up in my portfolio, and I talked about how it's an internal app, but I used it because I had a problem and I think other people have a problem, and kind of wrote it in such a way so if a client comes to my site, they're like, oh, look, Eric knows Rails, and oh, look, he's done stuff with A/B testing, and he's done stuff with conversion optimization. So he might be a good person to talk to about this project. And so you can use open source, or you can use kind of internal apps for yourself, or you can make like dummy apps where it's like, you might mock up a logo for an airline. All of those are kind of ways where you can build a portfolio. And as long as you kind of disclose, like, this is a project for myself, or this isn't for an actual client, that's going to be fine. Most clients just care that you can do the work that they need and that you can, you're getting results for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do like the approach of, this is stuff I did for me, this is stuff I did for a client. I also like the approach of, listing the open source stuff that you've contributed to or written. And there are a lot of different ways that you can actually build that up. Are any of those your favorite?
Well, and I was going to say one more thing is I had this problem at the beginning. I put everything I did into my portfolio. And like I said earlier, that's overwhelming. So when you're getting started, if you can get 4, maybe 5 solid portfolio items, solid in that, they're complete. They talk about the problem, not as in, it's a 6-month project. If you can get 4 or 5 of those, that's really all you need. And it could be just a string of open source contributions to a project. It doesn't have to be, you took over the project or you rewrote it in a different language or whatever. It could just be that, you fixed a couple dozen bugs in one little area.
Curtis, do you have any thoughts on this, on how to build your portfolio?
I did a lot of it at the beginning with screencasts. So I have wpthemetutorial.com, which is all about WordPress screencasts. I'm looking to move into, a little more, conversion consulting as well, with the e-commerce work that I do. So I'm going to be recording some screencasts coming up on presentations that I've done around, are sliders effective and effective e-commerce design. So that I can move towards that as well. And I'll put those up on my site.
Yeah, that's another thing. Presentations and screencasts, stuff like that, they're not typical portfolio items, but they are showing that you're an expert, you know what you're doing. And those can all kind of build the client's trust in you.
Yeah, well, I had to say the client I talked to earlier, Wakefield Scarce Galleries, they came to me because of a screencast, because I solved one of the problems they had in the screencast. And I said, we've got a whole bunch more. Let's get them fixed. And it was really like a really easy client to land because they already trusted that I could solve one problem.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've actually had people contact me because I gave a talk at a conference, and oddly enough, they contacted me about something that really didn't have anything to do with what I talked about.
Yeah, in that case, they feel like they know you, right? Especially if they've seen you in person.
Yeah.
I even find that with the screencasts, people feel more like they know you when they've heard you talk, and your idiosyncrasies come through. Even if you try to push for really, high production level, you still get the little things that you normally say in your sentences.
I get that a lot with the podcast too. I feel like I know you already. So you can put conference talks, you can put screencasts, you can put your own software in there. Is there any particular order that you should put them in?
Alphabetical by the 3rd letter.
I actually organized mine by the ones I wanted to show off first. So in my site right now, it's the top items are the ones I wanted to show off the most. Mm-hmm. After the first 2 or 3, they just kind of go however they were entered. But the first 2 or 3 are the ones that I really wanted to show off primary.
It's the same here. You have to, assume your prospective clients coming to your site, they have, the 30 seconds of attention or whatever. And so you want to show the strongest things first and, in a way, kind of hook them and get them to read more and learn more about you. And for my case, I actually have a bunch of stuff in my portfolio, but I've actually selected like the top 4 kind of projects that I kind of highlight. And those are the ones that I try to push them to, but then I have the others in there if they want to really dig in and kind of see it more history. And so it's, it's based on what kind of clients you want to attract, what they are looking for, and, maybe even highlight like a really complex or technical project to show like you can do big things. It just depends on what your branding and marketing wants to be.
Now, do you try and drive people to another, let's say, like contact me or something page from your portfolio, or do you just put it out there so that they can see what you can do? And then they'll click the contact link or whatever if they, in the header or whatever.
I think it's pretty crucial on your contact page to have your phone number as well. So that's something I've always included. I'm looking at kind of doing more of a CRM and tracking my leads and kind of seeing when they're warm and stuff, but I'm not sure about mainly cost on those things. I'm looking at Hatchbuck, I think it's called. I can get the link in the show notes. That's one that I'm looking at that would track all the leads on my site, track their interaction with my content, and then even emails as well.
Well, basically it's standard, conversion stuff. You always want some kind of action for someone to take on a page. Like you don't want them to read about your portfolio item, get excited about working with you, and then question what to do next and make them feel dumb for not knowing and then leave your site. Mm-hmm. So, a contact form is good. Even a little line like make it custom for each portfolio item because you don't really have that many. Is like, hey, if you want something similar to this, link, contact me and we can talk. Or in my case, I have people sign up for my client services newsletter where it's, I don't remember, 6 or 7 different emails that kind of introduces me. But anything, whatever you want, your main action on your website, like put that on your portfolio or your portfolio items. Like that's why you have a website, is to kind of get people to do that.
Yeah, right on my process page, I have a contact form. As they read through it, there's a contact form right in there, so they don't have to go anywhere else as well. But I should add more directive stuff to the portfolio items too.
That's pretty interesting. So do you guys ever refer people to your portfolio page, or is it something that people find when they come to your page?
It depends on how they interact with me, right? So I'll highlight, say a new client comes through just through email, I'll highlight one or two projects that are most pertinent to them. And then I say, you can see more. And here's my portfolio if they want to look at some more stuff we've done.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Eric?
I mean, basically, like a lot of people come to my homepage, like most sites, and then, some end up going to portfolio. Some of them, like my homepage is set up to talk about my services, what I do for clients. So like a lot of people just hit the homepage and then jump into the list. Like they don't actually go and browse around. I think I send people to the portfolio page as part of my getting to know me sequence. And that's more of like, here's some of the work I've done. For more details, here's the portfolio stuff. But sending people to my portfolio isn't really a goal I have. It's more there just as trust building. It's like if someone has an objection, they can go there and kind of say, oh, okay, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Are there any other aspects of portfolios that we should talk about?
I think using like directive language, not passive, which I talked a bit about at the beginning. I know when I first put my portfolio and had a friend read it and they were like, this is terrible. And they talked to me through a bunch of the stuff. And I was like, you're right, it is totally terrible. It was not. It was all about, I did this kind of cool thing, maybe. You should come get me to do something maybe cool for you too. Mm-hmm. It's really a sales page, like you're selling yourself. And so being directive and confident about it and writing well about it is an important part to proving that you actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's two other things. One, if you can get your client to give you a testimonial, which you should try to do anyways, if you can put that on the portfolio page for their project, that's a huge trust builder. And the second thing, I mean, we've been talking about portfolios as in the context of these are the projects I work on. I actually have I had, and it's changed, but I have like a client service or a client portfolio of like, here's the clients I worked with. And that's kind of what you see on a lot of sites where it's just a logo dump of like the big companies they worked with. That's another good way of building trust. And it shows like, okay, if Acme company trusted Eric, I can trust them. And, it's that whole quote, you never get fired for buying IBM or whatever. But having both a project type portfolio and then a portfolio of your clients is another good thing.
That's interesting. Do you put them both under the same like portfolio header and then they can click on projects or companies, or?
No, I organize it a bit different. I have portfolio and then I have kind of a big top level navigation called client services, which is details about my services. And it has a list of all my clients or current and past clients on there. And that's where their logos are. So it's, the portfolio is kind of the project side and the client services is the services I provide plus that added kind of trust stuff of the client logos.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I have worked with a few largish companies and it's nice to be able to say, hey, I did work for them. Well, I know this is run a little bit shorter than our episodes normally do, but unless there's more to talk about here, we should probably just do the picks.
There's one other thing, which I had a problem with this too. When you get busy, most people forget to market and all that. But another thing is, as you finish projects, start building a portfolio item form. I got to a point where I had like about a year, maybe even 2 years worth of projects done that I didn't have up on my site as portfolio. So it looked like, I did a bunch of work and then I stopped working, but I was actually just so busy I wasn't keeping up to date. What might be good is to once a quarter, every 6 months, or if you have a good process for closing out a project, make it a point to create a portfolio item about it. Even if you don't highlight it, even if it's not like one of the featured ones, creating the content and all that while it's fresh and getting screenshots, it's a lot easier than coming back 6 months later and trying to get the app to run or whatever. So that's a good thing. Make sure that you always have stuff you can cycle in and out.
Yeah, I always at least take screenshots. Like as soon as we're done, I use Paparazzi, which is just plug in the URL and it gives you screenshots. So it is very nice to use.
Very nice.
Yeah, I have a Chrome plugin I can share that lets you take screenshots of pages. I use that for like big sales pages that are like 40 pages long or whatever, and it makes it one long image.
Oh, cool. I need that. All right. Well, let's go ahead and do the picks. Curtis, do you want to start us off with picks?
Sure. I'm going to pick Red Booth today. So I've talked about how Trello was awesome before, but for the last probably 4 months now, I've actually switched over to Red Booth as my full project management suite. So it does everything for me, manages all my project and all my personal to-dos. It actually manages the grocery list my wife and I share as well. And I've also dropped OmniFocus as well. I used to use them both, Trello and OmniFocus in combination. Now I've got everything online. I can have my admin assistant deal with stuff, and my wife and I can share lists, and it's all in one spot.
Very nice. I do have a question about that. It sounds like it's kind of a team-level organization tool. The one thing that drives me a little bit crazy with OmniFocus, and you can kind of do it, but can you suck in email stuff? So, like, if I just forward an email to it or something, can just stick it in there?
Oh, yeah. Yep, I've automated that. It automates through Zapier as well. And so I have all my receipts for my admin assistant. When they hit the receipt notebook in Evernote, they get sent over to the proper list from Zapier as well. And you can email it to it. You have a private project as well, so that's where I kind of keep all my personal stuff. And Eric was mentioning in the chat that it used to be called Teambox. They rebranded a few months ago.
Very nice. I'll have to check it out.
I'll have to actually blog about the full switch and how I'm automating parts of it as well.
Cool. Eric, what are your picks?
All right, so I got 3 today. First one, I got back from MicroConf last week, and there's tons of information about it. But one thing that kind of came up was kind of doing, whether you have like a product business, a service business, whatever, trying to do something small every day to kind of improve it. And I just happened to have this in my Insta reader, and I read it on the plane back, but it's called Small Chunks. It's basically along the lines of a lot of the best entrepreneurs and people like founders and stuff, they aren't doing like these big change the world type projects. They're doing these small little things over and over, but they're so efficient at it that you don't, like, they get through 100 of them each day. So it's a nice little quote. I think there's a longer blog post about it, but I'll put the link in the show notes so you can follow and read it. It's pretty quick reading. The second thing is that screenshot program I talked about. It looks like it's available for Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. It's called Awesome Screenshot. It lets you take either a screenshot of the page you see, like the visible part that's in your browser, a selected area, like if you just want a little box around something, or I always use the entire page, and I'll actually use that to take an archive copy of my websites before I do like a major change or a major A/B test. It's free. It works pretty good. You can save it online to share, or you can actually save it to like a PNG on your local system. And then the third, for a bit of fun, is a YouTube video called The Expert. It's a short comedy sketch for anyone who does consulting, freelancing, or works with clients at all. You probably won't get more than a minute into this before you start busting up laughing. So I'll put that in the show notes. It's definitely a good thing to wrap up the day with.
Very nice. All right, I'm going to make a couple of picks. I think I've picked this on the show before, but I've been using Audible, and I've been listening to Platform by Michael Hyatt, and it's been a really terrific resource for marketing. So I'm going to pick that, and I don't know if I have any other picks, so I'm just going to stop there. But it was a good discussion. I'm definitely going to need to look into what it's going to take to get a portfolio listing for my up-and-coming website. But yeah, hopefully this helps some folks out. And if you have some other ideas for your portfolios that you've used that have worked, we'd definitely be interested in hearing those. And you can actually put those into the Freelancer Show forum. You can go to freelancershow.com/forum and sign up. And we'd love to see what other ideas you guys have.
Hosting and bandwidth provided by the Blue Box Group. Check them out at bluebox.net. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more. Would you like to join the conversation with the Freelancer Show panelists and their guests? Want to support the show? We have a form that allows you to join the conversation and support the show at the same time. Sign up at freelancershow.com/forum.